Well, UKIP launched its election campaign today. The central claim is that far from being a one-issue protest party, UKIP is actually the party that believes in Britain and is the one that backs small business owners, families, servicemen and women, and legal migrants who come here to better their lives. What's the party against? Corporatism, the nanny state, wasted overseas aid, high-speed 2 and hospital car parking charges. In a moment, we'll hear from UKIP's leader, Nigel Farage, but first, Katie Razzle reports on UKIP's day.
It's the ultimate political accolade. The UKIP leader now firmly in the political establishment as a puppet in the new show from some of the people behind Spitting Image. The real Nigel Farage also has a new look.
Hello there, how are you?
After a month off the booze, he says he's squeezing into suits he hasn't worn in ages.
Yes, as clean as you'll see it.
Right, does anyone else want a coffee or tea?
This tour of a boatyard in Canvey Island, Essex, as part of an orchestrated series of appearances today, is almost the first we've seen of the UKIP leader this year. The other parties went too early, he said, making the campaign already incredibly boring and a turn-off for voters. But could his low profile nationally so far in 2015 be more about the need to cement his popularity in South Thanet, the seat he needs to win at the general election?
If he's going to make some sort of breakthrough, he's going to want to be everywhere during the election campaign. But if he's to win Thanet, which is by no means guaranteed, he will need to be doing a lot of local campaigning there. And so it's an inherent contradiction that the party has. Certainly the polling suggests he's doing well, but there's nothing to suggest that it's definitely nailed on. And the crucial question will be, how many of those people who say they're voting UKIP now will still be voting UKIP come the election day?
A man who refreshes parts of Britain other leaders simply cannot reach, Mr. Nigel Farage.
It's not a UKIP event without some kind of reference to beer, hence this introduction to the leader's first public speech of the year.
UKIP as a political party, our candidates and our activists are reaching voters that the other parties can't reach.
Rhetoric was king here, though he spelt out again that UKIP won't go into coalition after the election or do deals with any party that doesn't agree to hold a referendum on Europe.
If you believe in Britain, if, like us, you're unashamedly patriotic...
But this was more about patriotism and standing up for what he called the small men and women than policies. We didn't learn any new ones, but he reiterated UKIP's policies we already know about. The party wants an Australian-style points system for immigration. UKIP would take people on minimum wage out of tax and scrap tuition fees for science, tech, engineering and medical degrees. They want to change the electoral voting system and abolish car park charges in NHS hospitals. NHS policy has exposed fault lines within UKIP. His party revolted at Mr Farage's suggestion the health service might have to be replaced by a system of private insurance. Perhaps not the right strategy if they want to win over left-wing voters.
Particularly if UKIP are now trying to increase their support from Labour voters, winning over Labour voters. Winning on the NHS is going to be very difficult. They have to prove that they care about a real loved institution, particularly to those on the left that they're trying to win now.
Do you think you should have handled things differently?
Aiming for mass appeal comes at a price, with party discipline often putting UKIP in the news. Godfrey Bloom of Sluts and Bongo Bongo Land fame left the party saying it was too politically correct. The prospective candidate for South Basildon resigned after being recorded using racist and homophobic language. But then it's only 2 decades since Nigel Farage made his first election appearance, narrowly beating screaming Lord Such to a few hundred votes in the Eastleigh by-election. His party's changed a bit since then, but has it changed enough?
Katie Razzle. Well, Nigel Farage put a lot of emphasis today on the ability of the party to take votes from all regions and from voters of all political backgrounds. Labour say that's ridiculous, as UKIP is more Tory than the Tories. So what kind of party is it? Mr Farage came into the studio earlier to answer that question, and I started by asking him if it was, as some have said, if UKIP was the true inheritor of Thatcherism.
There is one big similarity between UKIP today and Margaret Thatcher in 1979. There are times in a country and in politics where radical change is needed. She brought radical change. It came at a price, but she brought radical change. And we in UKIP think Britain needs that kind of change now.
Right. So you don't think of yourself as a Thatcherite?
Well, I could be a Churchillite, I could be a Gladstoneite.
Yeah, but are you a Thatcherite?
You know, I mean, all of this is irrelevant.
No, it's not. It's a really
was I a
question,
Thatcherite when I was 16? Yes. Did I think the country needed radical change then? Yes. Did I think that Britain had become backward and was too much in the grip of left-wing trade unions? Yes. But is that relevant today? No.
Well, I mean, your constitution does say that you seek to diminish the role of the state.
Absolutely.
And you want lower taxes on individuals and businesses.
Yeah.
So that is all a kind of, it's a Thatcherite air, isn't it? I mean, which do you lean towards? Government doing less or more? Just on that specific question, you lean towards...
I lean towards government doing less.
Right.
I believe that if you lift off the backs of the British people excessive regulation and the wrong levels of taxes in certain areas, they will do better and create more.
Let me ask you, I mean, whether your personal position is... what your personal position is as regards the existence of the NHS. And you know why I'm asking you this, right? Your party position is you clearly believe in it and you want more money to go into it. Your personal position, as you put it in 2012, was you said, I think we're going to have to move to an insurance-based system. Now, what's your personal position now?
Well, my personal position is the same, actually, as almost everybody's was 15 years ago. All of us, Labour, Liberal Democrats, Tories and UKIP, thought that there may be an argument that if you involved an element of private competition in competing for services, we get better value for money and better services. That has not worked. Just look at the PFI contracts. You know, the big shiny idea that Tony Blair had, and we now have our hospitals burdened with £300 billion of the rebate. So what I'm saying is this. We've tried this. Everybody agreed it should be tried. It hasn't worked. So why don't we now
sorry,
say...
I just have to... I actually will come to private provision in the NHS.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about that. But you talked about private insurance in the NHS. We have not tried that.
Well, what I talked about...
We've not tried it. We've not even... It's actually a taboo in British politics almost to say you want to abolish the NHS. It's totally different.
I did open that debate. You're quite right.
Well, you didn't open it.
And I did say...
what you thought
and I did say we're going to have to start
thinking
about whether the future...
You said you have to start moving to it, not thinking about it. You seem to have thought about it.
The French do it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
The Dutch do it to a certain extent. And, you know, one thing for certain is no debate should be closed. All debates in parties should be open.
But
I opened up a debate. I opened a debate within UKIP, and the answer was, let's run the National Health Service properly. And that is not just the manifesto position. It's a position I'm very happy to endorse.
Do you believe it, though? Do you personally believe it, or do you think we should move to an insurance?
Do I believe the British government is good enough to run public services properly is really your question.
No, my question is,
it's not.
Do you, Nigel Farage, believe in the existence of the NHS?
Yeah, oh, yes.
OK, so we've got clarity.
I mean, that's absolutely
So that was a mistake. It's only 2 years ago that you said it. This is what's so strange. This isn't like we had to dig back to your years as a stockbroker.
There is no mistake in calling for a debate and examining whether there might be a different and better way of doing things.
Actually, you didn't call for a debate, you called for a move. You did call for a move to it. You're not going to have that argument with your party now, though. Presumably that's overdone. If you get into a position of responsibility...
far more than that. Yeah. Far more than that. Next week, we will have our first big policy speech of the campaign.
But it is quite a big thing to have a personal U-turn on, isn't it?
There's no...
you didn't open a debate. You said you thought it would have to happen.
Now, maybe this is why politics has become so stilted and so dull in the United Kingdom. Because anybody in any party that dares to say, shall we think differently about
Shall we abolish the National Health Service?
No, I didn't. I wasn't.
You didn't put it that way, but you did say you thought we would have to move to an insurance-based system.
The French have, as we have, a health service that is pretty much free. Not as much as ours, but pretty much free at the point of provision, but a different means of funding it, all right? In 10, 20 or 30 years' time, if the population of this country is going to be 80, 90 or 100 million, we may well have to rethink the whole thing. But right now, what we have is a National Health Service in which between 2000 and 2012, we doubled expenditure and we finished up with fewer beds. Right. So the priority for now is to run it better.
But you could conceive at some point in the future moving to a more French-style health system.
I could conceive in the future of anything happening on any policy area. Right. And anybody in politics that tells you that what is here today must be in stone forever, frankly, isn't thinking.
Right. Because the other debate, and you started on this one, was the debate about private provision in the NHS, outsourcing. Some call it privatisation, but others call it outsourcing. At the moment, about 6% of NHS activity is contracted out to private providers. Andy Burnham was on this programme a couple of weeks ago and struggled to give a really clear answer about what the limits of that would be in his view. What's your view? You'd like more private provision?
No, my view is this. My view is I completely understand why the Blair government began to use outsourcing and private providers, and none of us at the time fought it. I now look at the consequences of it. I look at a PFI deal that, whilst it gave us shiny new hospitals, has given, repayments of $300 billion to the National Health Service. And frankly, I look at outsourcing things like cleaning contracts that simply haven't worked. So what I want to see is a National Health Service that runs better, and I want to see a National Health Service with better productivity, because nobody can doubt that actually we have not got bang for our buck in the massive increase of the money that we've put in.
Now, that is really, really interesting, because you are actually not there talking about a smaller state. You're actually talking about a bigger state. You don't want private cleaners in national health hospitals. You want government cleaners.
What I'm talking about...
This is just completely the opposite of what your constitution says.
No.
Isn't it?
We have a government in this country, and we have a public sector in this country, and we have a private sector in this country. Sadly, one of the things that has happened is the two have become merged, in that there's been a lot of private sector involvement in the state, and a lot of the private sector relying on state contracts. I'm not sure that actually this has worked very well. Why can't we have a National Health Service that we run with public money and run a damn sight better than we're doing today?
Right. So, just to be clear, who is going to clean a hospital ward? Someone working for a company, I don't know, like Serco, or somebody working for the National Health Service?
Someone that does it properly. And at the moment, the outsourcing to a variety of companies has given us poorer results. So why don't we run it properly?
It's smaller state, but at the same time, you want to nationalise a lot of the jobs that have currently been outsourced in the public sector and bring them back into the public sector.
As you
yourself, an interesting...
As you yourself say, that is only a total of 6% of the National Health Service.
But you want it lower than that, lower than 6%.
Well, I want to see it done properly and run properly, and it hasn't been.
Sorry, you're recording from the question. You want it lower than that, I thought you'd said.
I want us to have a public sector that is efficient.
Well, everybody wants that.
And gives us bang for buck.
Everybody wants that.
It is not doing that.
I tell you why I think you're not giving a clear answer. It's that what your party is trying to do is to appeal to a lot of former Labour voters, and you've got a lot of, let's call it, Thatcherite baggage. You've got a constitution that talks to small government and libertarian views, and you've got a past of supporting Margaret Thatcher, but now you're appealing to a different set of voters. You're lacking the clarity.
You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want to talk about Margaret Thatcher, or, as I say, William Gladstone. Or we can go back further if we want to have make this a half-hour historical chat about political philosophy. Let me say this to you very, very clearly.
Right.
We want a smaller state in this country. Right. That doesn't mean we don't respect the state. It doesn't mean that there aren't things the state can't do rather better than it's doing at the moment. But do we want to lift the burden of government regulation off the backs of the British people? Yes, we do.
Let's go on to a different policy area. Do you think people earning, I don't know, over 100,000 a year, should they be paying more tax or less tax? Are they part of this corporatist Britain you're trying to...
Well, they are paying more tax. I mean, they've always paid more tax.
No, more tax than they are now, or less tax.
I wouldn't put taxes up. No, I really wouldn't. I mean,
not even on them.
No, I wouldn't do that. And I think history shows you that if you do that, it actually doesn't work. I'm just about old enough to remember when the top rate of income tax, let alone unearned income, but the top rate of income tax was 83%. And we had that through the last half of the 1970s. And what did it mean? What it meant was many of our brightest and best young people, whether they were doctors or engineers or whatever they were, left this country and went to other parts of the world.
On the subject of tax, and we'll get to Switzerland in a minute, I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Non-DOMs, do you believe in non-DOMs?
Well,
I think... tax status for some very wealthy international people.
I don't actually. No, I don't actually.
Get rid of it.
I think it... Do you know something? This city of London is the most extraordinary international city. People, very wealthy people from all over the world are coming here. Rather than discounting it, we could almost charge a premium, and they would still come to London. And I also think it's wrong that, you know, your billionaire from Saudi Arabia or perhaps from Russia can go down Bond Street and buy up the most expensive and some of the finest jewellery in the world. I've no problem with that. Then they get to Heathrow and get the VAT back. Right. So, I think on things like that, actually, we really should be an awful lot tougher.
Right, so we underprice ourselves by saying, come here for cheap tax rather than...
No, I think we do, yeah.
So non-DOMs, I mean, if you were Chancellor, but unlikely, I think, in the short term, but you would say, let's get rid of all this stupid tax stuff and non-DOMs.
I mean, I want taxes to be fair and straightforward and simple, but I actually think we've sold Britain short with this.
I wonder what you had made of this whole secret Swiss bank account stuff this week. Whose side are you on? Some have said, well, it's the wealth creators. They can do what they want with their money and they can avoid tax.
Well, I'm not on the side of the big banks. and I think...
Okay. What about those who put money in big banks in Switzerland? Is that... Can you see any purpose for a Swiss bank account at all? I mean, a secret Swiss bank account? Why would anyone...
and I think actually that's all changed, really. The world's changed. Yeah. You know, again, I'm old enough to remember when income taxes seemed to be punitive and wrong, people did all sorts of things to try and evade and avoid paying tax. When you have fairer tax rates, then, you know, morally, it begins to become questionable.
So Swiss bank accounts dodgy, to use a word someone else has used, or...
But again, the trouble with this is it's also complicated. There isn't one simple answer. They may well be used for dodgy purposes, but you may find that the person that's got a Swiss bank account has a Swiss husband and a house in Switzerland.
Yeah, no,
and there might be a very legitimate reason. I think to try and paint all of this simply in terms of right and wrong isn't that straightforward. I want people paying fair taxes in this country and paying them here. I find it hugely hypocritical that we have front benches in the House of Commons that talk about this, whilst they themselves, in many cases, are direct beneficiaries of trust funds that have been based all over the world.
Didn't you have one in Isle of Man? You had one in the Isle of Man for your family.
I set one up for my children, never used it and closed it. But I've never been a beneficiary of one, and I've never been a named beneficiary of one.
In a previous interview, I did some sort of social litmus test questions on the Prime Minister. I want to try one or two of them on you. They're kind of just to get your instinct, OK? So one of them was, I don't know if you saw it, two gay men married kissing in the park. Does that give you does that make you think that's bad, shouldn't be allowed to happen, or do you think that's rather sweet?
I couldn't care less.
You couldn't care less, so that's OK?
I couldn't care less. But there are people in this country that could care less.
Well, hang on.
I'll tell you what's interesting about this.
Should they be kissing or not, or should they be saying...
They shouldn't be banned from doing it. That is for certain, and if I believe in a smaller state, then this is absolutely consistent with that. However...
But I'm sensing you're a little bit uncomfortable with it.
I'm not uncomfortable with it. What I'm saying to you is this, that if there are people out there who are uncomfortable with, for example, gay marriage, they should be allowed to have that opinion without being utterly condemned. And I do think that if we believe in tolerance, that has to be a two-way street. Yeah. And we've rather lost sight of that.
OK, so tolerate people who are against it, but the people who are against it should tolerate it. Yeah.
Tolerate people who are against it within reason.
No, that's...
You know, I mean, sensibly, and I'm certainly referring to, you know, the active Christian communities, and for that matter, Muslim communities and all other faiths.
One other one, page 3. We had your colleague Douglas Carswell here. He was pretty glad it looked like it was the end of page 3. He didn't like page 3.
Well, in political parties, we all have different opinions, and I haven't got a problem with page 3.
You haven't a problem?
It's a free press, for goodness sake. If you buy the Sun newspaper and it's got page 3, you know what you're getting.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much. Thank you.